Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Saturday's On the Setteee. I'm really excited about today, and Nets and I will tell you a little bit more about what's been going on today as we've been in the neighbourhood of B16. But I'm really looking forward to today's On the Setteee. If you don't know about On the Setteee, it's a chance for us to bring incredible, amazing people from both across the neighbourhood that we're based in here in B16 Birmingham and across the country, if you've been on some of the On Settees before, to have really relaxed, connected conversations about life, about people's practices, about where they live. And so today we've got an incredible guest, which I'll tell you a bit more about in a second. And On the Setteee is one of the programmes that we're regularly doing at the Front Room, which is the first phase of an ambitious neighbourhood project that we have kick-started here in Birmingham called Civic Square. You can find out more about On the Setteee, the Front Room, Civic Square on our website, which will be in the chat, and you can find out about future sessions, which are both happening in person while it's safe, and we'll talk a bit more about that when Nets is on, and also virtually for those of you who are still shielding at home or unable to get out, or if like now there's a huge downpour outside and you don't fancy being in a park, we've got lots of incredible online programming as well. So that's my little intro. I'm Imi, one of the co-founders of Civic Square, and I think this is my second On the Setteee, and we're going to be talking today to Nets Derbyshire, who is based here in B16, and I'm going to invite Nets on so we can do a bit more of an intro when she's on the screen. Welcome, Nets.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, it's always nice, isn't it, when the technology works well? So I'm very honoured to have you here, Nets. You're one of the first people I came across when we first started to work more intentionally in the area, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about I've got tons of questions, but I'm really looking forward to hearing about your history, both here and before, and also the incredible stories that you have of the work that you've done and the opportunities and assets that are here in B16, and also your hopes and dreams for the area. So rather than me introduce you too much, it'd be really great to hear a little bit from you about yourself, about the work that you do, and your relationship with B16, Ladywood, and the wider area. Welcome, Nets.
Hi. Yeah, well, I'm going to take these glasses off somewhere. They're shining all over the place, so I can't see you, but you can see me. So I came here about 18 years ago. 19 years ago altogether, came to get married, lived in Bristol before that, so actually been all over the place. But here in this house, just next to Port Loop, I've been here for about 18 years. And I started off working, I've done all sorts of things. So worked at Sure Start. That was one of my really enjoyable jobs, and that was how I got to know loads and loads of people in the area. And from about the time that I left there, well, I was linking up there with lots of the groups that were going on, and left there, got a redundancy unfortunately, and ended up working in college as a support worker for people with who needed additional support in college there, and then in residential support work, but now more recently I've been working as a neighbourhood networker, which fits in with everything that I do outside really, because for quite a long time I've been involved in local community activities on a sort of smaller scale, just as a local participant really. So, going along to coffee mornings and just helping the fun day set up and all the sorts of things that happen in an area like this, just as somebody who joins in and does things.
Amazing. Okay, so there's so many questions I'm going to go through about your work with the Karis Neighbourhood Scheme, your work as a community researcher in the area. But let's kick off about Nets, the residents. Tell us about what you really love about B16. What's your favourite part of living here? And you've been here for 18 years. what keeps you here? What makes your heart sing?
People, absolutely 100% the people. I mean, what keeps me literally in this house, as opposed to anywhere else in B16, is largely the bus routes, because I don't drive and I can walk to, you know, the number 80s that will get me into town and out to West Bromwich, and the, you know, the number 11s that will get me everywhere else. But the thing that keeps me here in Ladywood, Edgbaston area is just there's such amazing people around, and there are wonderful things going on. And I'm still in touch with people like Sure Stop. My daughter's, I worked there when she was a baby. She's 17 now. And we're still in touch with people. And unfortunately, I mean, a lot of the things that happened there have stopped because that's changed. The format there have changed a lot. One of the things that people have been saying is, oh, wish we could have those days back again where there were all these sort of drop-ins that, you know.
Well, tell us a little bit more about the beginning of that journey, because I've heard you say before Sure Start and your work there, you absolutely loved it and it was such important work, and a lot of people miss what that provided. For someone like me who was a teenager 18 years ago when Sure Start was around, tell me more about what made Sure Start so great and your time there so great.
Well, it was a place for families. It was really supposed to be limited to children under 4, I think, and their families. But obviously in the holidays, siblings would come and we would do all sorts of things for them. But I ran a drop-in, so there was something happening every day. There was always something on the calendar, from this week is National Teeth Week. How do you you know, and doing craft activities around keeping your teeth clean, to every religious ceremony that you can possibly think of was celebrated. And we even had a time where it was something like an accident week, and we had we got a big box from is it ROSPA, the Society for Prevention of Accidents or whatever, with all the road crossing kit in it that they could have out in the playground, and we took them around all the toddler groups. So all the toddler groups had their little lollipop man stick and, you know, the traffic lights and everything like that. Singing groups, everything going on in there. And there was a really good sort of community kitchen. So anybody could access good, affordable, healthy meals from there. I mean, I say anybody with children, you know, families. So I think one of the big things about living in Ladywood is that there are a lot of communities. It's not just one community, it's not one homogenous mass, but people from all the different communities could come into there and feel safe and feel welcomed. And a lot of those people were people who don't have access, like they wouldn't necessarily have a lot of money, but they could afford a meal there because it was really cheap. They could get signposted to all the advice workers and things like that for anything that they could possibly need from there. So there are still groups that do that. Outside of COVID, because to actually go to a place now isn't quite as possible. But that's one of the things that that Karis Neighbour Scheme do as well.
So I'm really interested in this, because I think that one of the, you know, I before we move, there's loads of incredible things that you're going to tell us about that are happening in the area and that you're involved in, and we'll talk about Karis. But just while we're on this topic, so you talk about that time quite fondly, and like you said, people remember that time as, you know, it would be really great if we had that again. What do you think, not having that, without that being, it's not a criticism on what's going on now, we're going to talk about all the incredible things, but what do you think the area lost when something that was so integral to so many communities coming together and having the support and advice and connection that they required, especially for young families? What sort of impact has that had, and what has the area lost because of the loss of spaces like that?
I think it's lost. That, as I say, I'm not saying it's lost it completely, because there are other groups that do things like this on a smaller scale, but it's people coming to individuals connecting in those spaces. It's creating a space where individuals and families can come and connect and make friends that will then, you know, they're still supporting each other. So
and do you think there was something special about how families and communities from different backgrounds were coming together? And is that, you know, because I was walking down Edgbaston Reservoir the other day, and I was walking around it, and it's one of my favourite spots. And one of the things that always strikes me about there is it's a place within 5 or 10 minutes that you can see every type of community and age coexisting. And it feels like that's something so special about the area. And I wonder, you know, what your reflection on that is, and what you saw at Sure Start around those communities coming together.
Yeah, it did make that possible. And, you know, even people who come for the first time to into the country, new into the country, could, because sometimes people, you've got that crossover between different cultures, and you can teach people about each other's different cultures, but to actually get to know people and to chat, that was an important thing. And then also to say, if you're new into the country, I know somebody who speaks your language, and you come along to this other group as well, and there's lots of people there who speak your language, while we're all learning English and drinking tea and coffee and the kids are playing. So there was that was a big, I think the interconnection of people there.
Amazing.
But also providing the access to services was really important. Having one point where people could go to and say, I know that I can access, if they can't give me this service, they can tell me where I can get it, and it won't be far away.
Yeah, that's that's really, really interesting to hear. And I guess over my time, even just building the hub and Civic Square, there are a lot of people that talk back to the time of Sure Start centres and what they meant for communities. And of course, it's not something really I, especially during my working life, really came across. So it's always really interesting for me to hear the reflections from people about what was so special. Of course, they were never, nothing's perfect, but I often hear that. So it's really nice to hear from you, your experience of that. And so you started to mention about some of the other incredible things that are going on, and we'll talk about lots of amazing people in the area and work that you know of. But let's start with you and tell us a bit more about the work that you're doing now. It'd be great to hear about Karis Neighbour Scheme. What does that do? Your role when you were a community researcher. But yeah, tell us about NETS now and the work that you're doing.
Okay, so I'll quickly run over the community research a bit, because that is quite quick, which was, how do you explain Use It? Use It was set up to try and raise, I don't know, boost the economy in the local area, but not in necessarily a just financial way, but to enable people into jobs. And one of the help people to set up businesses. And then another arm of that was to support people like me to do small bits of research that would benefit the community. So it was individuals from the community doing research within it to support it. That was basically that. So one of those pieces of research that we did was commissioned by the council around childhood obesity, for example, and that enabled them to get quite a substantial pot of money to work on setting up a programme towards combating that. So things like that.
Yeah, well, Use It was interesting for us because that's how we first met many of you. We met Carolina through that, and we were connected to some of the developers behind Port Loop, and have started on that. It's been nearly 2 and a bit years now on that journey of trying to understand what the long term of that is and what our role might be in here. So certainly, you know, whilst it was quite a short programme, and there was lots of great things, of which one for us was meeting you and Deborah and Carolina and David and then later sort of Urban Splash and Birmingham Settlement and all the Sam, you know, all these amazing people that are connected here. So it certainly was a nice moment for us. But one of the things I've not ever really talked to you about at much length is the work that you're doing at Karis Neighbour Scheme. So I see signs of it. I see signs as I walk down the road, and I know of it. But tell us, if someone lives in this area or is wondering about the work that it does, tell us a little bit more about that and your role now.
Yeah, so Karis is absolutely amazing, and I've been involved with Karis in various ways, more or less since I came here, and certainly since I was at Sure Start. So my job now is it's called Neighbourhood Network Scheme, and Karis is one of 4 partners in the Ladywood constituency that are supporting a citywide project to map all assets that are available to people over 50 in the area. That's how it started, and then it went on to mapping C19 provision. So that's my bit, and that's overseen in the Ladywood constituency by Birmingham Settlement, and its 4 partners are Nechel's Pod, Soho First, Karis Neighbour Scheme and Birmingham Settlement. But Karis Neighbour Scheme here are much bigger than that. They punch above their weight, they really, really do. They were set up by some GPs who kind of looked at people coming in and said, I can't prescribe for the fact that you're lonely, basically, or, you know, for the needs that you've got, there's not medication, you need somebody to come alongside you. And so they set it up as a befriending and advocacy service, and they now, we're celebrating 20 years this year. And it's grown enormously, and they've got they work with asylum seekers and refugees with an ESOL class, a Welcome to Ladywood group, which is that's a coffee drop-in, basically. It's just a drop-in. Come and have drinks, bring your toddlers, bring your kids along. Loads of food always involved, always some activity for the toddlers, some activity for the parents. The ESOL class, the toddlers can come too. There's a sort of space for them there, with always structured activities as well. Welcome to Ladywood drop-in is brilliant, because that's what I was saying. There's someone there that speaks every language under the sun almost. So if you're new to the area, come along to that. And that's closely linked with the Ladywood Community Project, which hopefully I can have time to talk about a bit later on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they've got those. They've got elderly befriending service, which does a lot of work. They do, so they do telephone befriending. They have regular morning, like a coffee morning slot. And then they have a big thing called Time for Tea, where they get more people together, which is like every 6 weeks, something like that. That's quite big. So there's altogether, I think, about 80, 90 elderly people that they support on a regular basis through those. And they've been, during lockdown, doing telephone befriending, giving them food parcels regularly with sort of quizzes and activities and things like that in them as well. And now more that some of them are able to get out and about. We're hoping to be able to do some socially distanced walks with some of them, hopefully, as things progress. So that's a really good, really important aspect of what we do. There's advocacy work that's been going on all the time. And then there was, again, pre-lockdown, the thing where you know, if somebody needed help, they'd get a bunch of volunteers sort of to come and, I don't know, shift a fridge freezer into a flat, or decorate if you can't, you know, do that for yourself, or to get a garden into a state where a toddler can play in it. All of those practical things. We've had a food cupboard there since way before food banks existed. Although, to be honest, that's not a thing at the moment, because that's been moved on with COVID and with other things that are happening. What else happened? We've got debt advice, not debt advice, but financial, got to get this right, benefits advice. So, you know, if you want advice onto what benefits are available to you and things like that, then we've got that there. We've got two projects there. We've got one working with the Ladywood project, or rather out of their premises, and we've got one which is specifically for people over 50, that where we can go out and about. And again, normally we would be able to go into people's houses, but all of that, all of the benefits advice and everything like that is being done over the phone now, but it's not stopped, it's still there. So what else?
And I think I was going to say what I think is so interesting to me, and maybe this is a good way for us to talk about some of all the other things that you want to feature and connect, because I know that we've just had a comment in the chat where someone's written, Nets has an amazing gift of connecting people together. She introduces people to other people, groups that are just what people need at that moment. And I was going to say that that's certainly something that I've experienced, you know, since I've met you. You just connect people wholeheartedly, and through that connection, and you're so honest. You're really honest with us about, you know, the things that you thought were great about what we were thinking of doing and what we need to think about most. And I think that's so true. We've got to know of so many organisations because of the connections and generosity of people like you, of Deborah, who was on the sofa last week, on the settee last week, and Sam. And so during, and you referred to COVID a little bit, and what I saw in the last 4 or 5 months is the real strength of so many years of work by so many people, that meant that at a time of huge crisis, Ladywood, B16, the neighbourhood surrounding this area, mobilised in an incredible way, from being the central food hub to befriending, through isolation support, through you know, the stuff that Eat, Make, Play were doing in terms of sending kits out to people to do creative things, even tours and others. There's so many things that mobilised all together, and I remember a dinner once where we talked way before COVID, and you said there's so much going on here that's been going on for a long time. And I wonder, and it was no surprise to me that the area mobilised in such a beautiful way in such a crisis, because all that groundwork had been done by so many people like you for so long. And so I'm wondering whether this is a nice way for us to segue into maybe using COVID as an example, so you can start going through some of the projects you want to tell us about, and also to say that I'll say on your behalf, there's hundreds of things going on in this incredible area. So if Nets misses something, I don't think it's because she's trying to miss anyone out, but it's because obviously we've got limited time. So tell us a little bit about, you talked about this, you know, most recently in COVID-19, many organisations joined together to provide support and to do so many amazing things through the goodwill and hard work of local residents giving their time to help each other, is a quote that you said. So I'm interested, tell me a bit about these amazing organisations. Just today, we've had Sam come to collect the coffee composting from Eat, Make, Play. We've had Anne pop down with things from the share house for people to take home. I saw you and David this morning, and now we're back on the settee. You know, tell us about what's happening in this area. Tell us about some of the projects and what you love about them all, and let's see how many we can get through. And a little shout to everybody who's watching. If you've got any questions, get them in fairly soon, because this conversation will fly by. because Nets has so much knowledge. And so get them in now. But yeah, tell us a bit about this area and all these amazing projects you know of, and people.
Okay,
and
so people who've come together during lockdown, during C19, please forgive me if I've missed you out on this one, but Ladywood Helpers is a big one, so I can't say that I'm going to get all of them. But Ladywood Helpers was Karis Neighbour Scheme, the Ladywood Community Project. The Ladywood Community Project is absolutely phenomenal. They've been right in the centre of that community centre, working with people, doing drop-ins, doing toddler groups, doing parties. They do uniforms, you know, they do meals during the holidays. They do they've got so many things going on there, it's unbelievable. Karis does this as well. They're on separate things. They do trips out, and when they do a trip out of Birmingham, you get people on that coach who have never left the city in their lives. They're, you know, they give amazing support to they've got a washing machine there, which sounds really tiny, but that has been so missed over lockdown, I bet, just because if you can't afford to keep, you know, you've got a choice. You can't afford to keep a washing machine running. That's a really big thing. So anyway, yeah, so there was them. There was Suited for Success. You must interview Pat. So Pat is Suited for Success is a job scheme. So it doesn't actually give people, well, it does. It gives people the hand up that they need to get jobs by supporting them with everything from how to write a CV, how to present themselves at interview, how to do all the online stuff, all the support that they need to get themselves ready and the confidence building, and then literally providing them with the suits that they need to do it. So yeah, that's Suited for Success is part of that project. And then a number of the schools and the churches and other groups in the area have all come together to make up Ladywood Helpers. When the swimming pool was closed and they gave over that whole space, and that was literally another food distribution hub from there. And yeah, so that they were limited a little to the postcodes that they could provide in, but they were providing befriending advice and things like that as well. They've had to draw back what they can do quite a lot now because of partly because of volunteers going back to work, partly because of not having the space in the leisure centre anymore and not being able to get into the community centre because that's still locked down. I think a lot of things that have happened in the community centre, although when you went into it you might think it was virtually empty. You know, you've had a lot of things really going on in there. You know about the junk food Brum, which runs out of the share house in Winson Green and is still giving out food parcels outside the community centre Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and they do amazing things. We've also got, there's two junk foods, there's Junk Food Central as well. So basically the only difference between those is where they work. And so they all do, so Junk Food Central has been providing food for another distribution hub up down City Road at St Germain's Church there. And they've been used to before lockdown, and I'm thinking they're hoping to do this again, doing food distribution up at greenhouses behind City Hospital. And then both of them do separate cafes, pop-up cafes all around the city. Then they don't limit themselves, and they have been literally lifelines because they're on a pay-as-you-feel basis. And that's what people really need. So
yeah, just while you're on the junk food, I have to say that I've been to the cafe in the St Vincent Street at Ladywood Community Centre, and it's so incredible. And what I'm always amazed by is obviously the energy of all the volunteers and those who work there, and Anne, who is a force of nature.
Absolutely
and
amazing
to have Anne on the settee. But what I'm always amazed by, so Anne popped down this morning and just bought me a huge bag and was like, we've got all of this stuff. So for those of you who don't know, the Real Junk Food Project also, so they save food from basically the skip, right? But we're not just talking about, we're talking about fresh food that just because of regulation can't be, you know, on the shelf any more than the date that it's on. So they often get it just before perfectly good food's about to be skipped. But I'm always amazed, like Anne literally brings like Waitrose milk and cream and all of these things. And today she was even saying to me, she goes, we've got all this soya milk, we've got all this stuff, send people down to the share house. So not only do they do vital things for people in need, they're literally saving tons and tons of food from the skip and from food waste, and then turning that into this amazing cafe that's pay as you feel. So yeah, I have to say I've absolutely loved the way in which junk food operates here, because it does so many different things all together at the same time.
And the other thing that they did was over here, again, this is pre-COVID, sorry, but we've got a little church on the corner of Summerfield Crescent. Christchurch Summerfield had a little hall there, and we would have weekly coffee mornings there, and then a monthly thing called Neighbour Nights, which was everybody would come together, and Junk Food would initially do the food for that as well, although we did try and do some more, everybody bring some stuff as well, because we just, for a more neighbourly feel towards before lockdown. But yeah, the Junk Food used to supply. And again, people would come to the coffee mornings, they'd come for the food, for the junk food, they'd sit and have a tea and a coffee, and they'd get to know their neighbours. And yeah, it was absolutely amazing. Yeah. Yeah,
so let's talk about that coffee morning for a second, because I managed to come to a couple of those before, I mean, everything is like before lockdown, we keep saying, but I managed to come to a couple of those, and I've forgotten the name of them, places of welcome. Yeah. So it was a place of welcome that I went to. And I remember when I worked in Springfield about 8 years ago, we had a place for welcome at the Springfield Centre, and it was incredible. And I'd forgotten how powerful it was to have one of those, because Springfield Centre was also in a place not too dissimilar to Ladywood, you know, lots and lots of different communities from lots of different backgrounds and income levels and jobs and countries that they'd come from, or whether they had grown up and been born here. And the place of welcome was such a warm and beautiful place. And when I walked into the Summerfield coffee morning, I was welcomed by these incredible women who were making tea. I'd heard about 30 different stories by the time I'd left, because there was something very unique. And I wonder if you might want to talk about this a bit. So there was a lot of newly arrived communities, and so many not just beautiful stories, difficult stories as well, but there was something really special about that coffee morning. Tell us a bit more about it, because I'm sure you've seen it grow over years, and it's a place where so many different communities are welcomed. And what makes it so special? Because I could feel it when I walked in that day.
I think it's because it's a safe space. It's there to be a safe space. And although it doesn't look patrolled, there are always a few people around who are there to have their eyes open for anybody who's sort of maybe needs a bit of extra support and a bit of extra attention. Who would just, you know, if somebody needs a chat, not necessarily, oh, let's go and pounce on you, but just to make sure that nobody's left alone. I don't think you'd go in there and you'd be left alone. I think that's something that is quite important, that there's always somebody there to talk to. There's also a real, people get to know each other, and they do trust each other. But new people are always introduced to somebody. There's whatever you come there with, whatever your gifts, whatever your skills, you will end up talking to somebody who's got the same interest as you. It's just like, I don't know, somebody came in from Bearwood and said, oh, I do yoga, I'd be interested in doing so. And then straight away they were, oh, well, come over here and talk to this person. Yeah, it's really, there are loads.
Something's very, very. I felt part of a family, even though it'd been the first time I'd walked in, and I realised how I think that these were the moments that I remembered the real uniqueness of neighbourhood life, and a neighbourhood like this, where, like you say, so many people are ultimately looking out for each other, and you could feel that there. And I remember Anne and Sam saying to me, because I think they were volunteering that day, they were like, this is where, put your name down and come and volunteer. And I'd give a shout out to anyone who's watching to say, if you want to feel the beating heart of this area, to definitely get on that schedule when lockdown's over, and help to support those mornings and the neighbour nights. But yeah, we could keep talking about this for ages. So I'm going to pass back to you to say, you mentioned neighbour nights. There's lots more that you could tell us about. Tell us about other things that you want to share with us.
I think one of my favourite things about which I'm really missing this year, and everybody is really missing, I guess, is the Ladywood Fun Day. So about, I think maybe 12 years ago, probably, we started up with just a few small groups getting together and saying, let's have a fun day on the field. And half the community comes together now on a regular basis every year to just set up. They've got bouncy castles, they've got people doing games for the kids, they've got loads of different people doing food, you've got stalls of every kind, you've got raffles, you've got, everything you want at a fun day. So that's a real thing that we're missing this year, because you're not sort of sitting out there in the sun, or I say sitting out there, you're not struggling with the gazebos at the beginning and end of the day either. But yeah, everybody would come to that. Absolutely everybody. You'd have a cake making competition, not cake making, best decorated cake, and a children's fancy dress, and whatever it was that was happening that year would, So that's on the playing field behind, is it St John's and St Peter's School? The school opposite the community centre. Yeah,
absolutely. And I managed to, there's a little hole in the fence now, which I don't know if I should say this on a Zoom, but yesterday I was walking around the reservoir, and as I was walking around with a friend who's also in the Civic Square team, and I was pointing out lots of bits, and we came across the Tower Ballroom, which some of you saw Iris on the Setteee a couple of weeks ago talking about Dreaming Tower Ballroom. It's incredible history and what it could be in the future if it isn't just sort of co-opted by developers. And when we walked around, we saw this little hole in the fence, which we sort of went through. Maybe I shouldn't really say this, but we went to the field that is owned by Birmingham Settlement, which you talked about, and we saw the polytunnels and the growing project that had happened over lockdown. So do tell us a little bit about some of those.
So that's a different playing field. So the big fun day was on would have been that was a massive fun day, which would have happened down on St Vincent Street. So the playing field by the reservoir is actually, I'm surprised you can still get onto it, you shouldn't be able to, going to be closed off very soon, because they're actually to build a small sort of shelter, a very, very small little building on there that will enable us, when we're doing events on there, to be able to serve teas and coffees and have space for people to go to the toilet, and just an admin-y space and things like that. So that'd be very small, but it's starting work on it very, very soon. I'm surprised they haven't done that yet. But yes, that belongs to Birmingham Settlement. About a year back, Sam's probably told you this story, but they got Another set of wonderful workers who do growing up at the hospital, city hospital greenhouses there, came down and started up a growing space with Sam on that project. And they've now got, they're still back at the hospital again, but Sam and the Eat Make Play set up a growing space there this year. But in between those times, we've had amazing community events on that field. Just really finding out, the first one was just to connect. And we weren't expecting very many people at all. And I think they had about 200 people for that first one. And which was absolutely beyond our expectations. And then the next one was more of a sort of, let's find out what the community wants from the reservoir. And it was part of the larger consultation, and it was done in connection with a load of artists who, they had art stations. They'd worked with community groups over the weeks previous, and then they had stations around the reservoir where they had different art things going on. And then there was this big community event on the playing field as well, where you had, again, all your games, junk food, you had the growing things going on, you had somebody there bike repairing, you had, I'm not sure if this was the first one or the second one, but I think you had wood turning and things like that on there. Music, you had sort of little thing in the corner and you had people singing, and yeah, or children's games, big run around sports, tug of war, everything going on there. So yeah.
So like you've talked a lot about, and it's palpable here, it's palpable, the community spirit. If you come across just a few of you, if you bump into just a few of you, many of whom we've got coming up on the Setteee as well, are just incredible movers and shakers, people so passionate about the area, and it very quickly you start to learn how much everybody is working together and trying to work together through great times, through difficult times, so many incredible projects. But the area is also changing. It's changing a lot. You've also seen it change over the last 20 years, as you've already mentioned. So you really know about that change, and you can see what's coming in the future. We've also got a question in the chat about this, so I'm gonna bring on the next part of the conversation by incorporating the question that we've got in the chat. There's lots more people coming to the area. There's many more homes being built. There's lots of development happening, and there can be quite obvious, even geographical and structural things that separate different areas. Huge roads that make people only 20 meters apart from each other, but it can feel like two very different worlds. What do you think is going to be important about making sure that all these gaps, these different parts of Ladywood, North Edgbaston, Summerfield, all these different names for different parts of this area, what's going to be really important in bridging that gap, in bringing communities together as we both come out of COVID, but we come into a time in the future where this area is changing a lot, and we can talk specifically about some of the developments in a bit, but I just want to know, what are your thoughts on what it means for us to bridge the gap between different communities, those who live here, those who are arriving here, those who are moving here? What does that look like?
I think for me, it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning about Sure Start, that I think it's about relationships. I think it's about supporting people to build relationships and to build trust, that so that people aren't, I don't know you, I don't know your community, I don't know what you're like, I'm not going to come near you. If you actually get together with those people, you realise that you've got more in common. And that's one of the other things we used to do at the community centre was, do you remember the Joe Cox days, where you there's more in common than there is that divides us. And I think that that is a really important thing to actually have settings where people can come and do together, and people can share their stories, their skills, their the things that they like. One of the things I really like the idea of is that there's a group not far away from here. It's not quite in this area, so I won't harp on too long, but they do in Winston Green. They've got a thing called Flavours of Winston Green, and they cook, but they teach each other to cook in their own language, so in their own style. So you will be cooking in the style of this particular country, led by somebody who's, understands that and knows that. And you've got a load of small little burners, everybody has a go, and then that person will tell their story. So you're learning, you're gaining experience, and you're actually telling stories is so important, because you find out you can't know somebody until you begin to know a bit about their story. But once you open up and you trust each other and you tell each other stories, I think, and that doesn't necessarily have to be verbally. It can be in art, it can be in practical, it can be while I'm helping you do up your house. But I do think that relationships and encouraging people to build relationships across what they would expect to be boundaries is a key way of doing that.
And it's really interesting and important to hear you say that, because I think both in the changing area, this is going to be crucial, vital. I mean, there's lots of parts of the work that we're involved in that is really about relationships, but also recognises many other things are important: land, ownership, assets. All of this needs to also be in the community's hands. But one of the things that I've really seen here is the relationships at the core of all of that. And I feel like it's going to be so important in this changing area. But also, I don't know what you think about this, but it just feels like a time in society where we are being pushed apart and more divided than ever. And that really simple thing of what do we have in common? What is our shared endeavour? You see a lot of that coming together here through food, through play, through growing the things we do together. How, as someone who does not have as much experience as you, am I over egging it when I say that it feels like we're more divided in society? That I'm fearful of what's happening with what happened with Brexit and the conversations that are happening with COVID, and am I over egging it over the last 20 years? Are things better? Are things less? You've got so much experience in community connections, in neighbourhood life, in what we're seeing. What's your instinct on that? Because I always like to sort of check myself about whether are things worse, or is it just different? What are your feelings?
I think that things are more visible.
Okay.
I think that divisions that have probably been there all the time but just gone unnoticed are more visible. But I think that there is, because of that, more frustration, that people know what they haven't got more than they ever did before. And there's also a lot of frustration around this area, because there have been a lot of people parachuted in to do this to the area, make this better, make that better. And people don't want to come have somebody parachuted in to make them better. They want somebody to commit, and they want somebody to help them to not do for me, but do with me, and not do it's like we've had so many consultations on what would happen on the loop. I'm not just saying the loop, but
no,
that's one of them. And it very much was like, well, this isn't a consultation because you've told me what you're going to do already and you've made your mind up, and no, nothing I see. And people are worried, I think, that, for example, the new developments are going to price them out of their houses. That worry is definite. That's there. Because a lot of this is landlord owned, and they are going to put their rents up. And
yeah, absolutely. So I was going that's a very clear piece of data that even we've been doing a lot of research on with Andy, who just in our team, who does a lot of work on housing. There's the area is disproportionately represented by private rented sector compared to many other parts of the city. And of course, that then means that if house prices go up, people are generally fearful of their rents going up, and that means them being priced out. And it's not to talk about today, but one of the key pieces of work that we've been thinking about in our housing project is, what does it mean for more people who are renting to move into affordable community built housing on land that is otherwise undevelopable. So if you're interested in that, we'll have more on that in Civic Square, and I look forward to also telling you more about that next, about how we can think about an actual strategy to deal with that, because there's lots of land that developers won't want to touch because it's not viable enough. So there's some great small sites work there. But now we're on, because I wanted to get on to the example of Port Loop. I've heard for many years that Port Loop is an Icknield Port Loop has been a site that has been consulted and talked about by lots and lots of communities by lots and lots of consultants for many years. And now we've finally got some activity here, and things are happening. First, let's go into because we're going to finish on what some of the exciting things that you look forward to and hope, and what keeps you going in this work with so many years of experience. But first, let's talk about this very particular geography. And now I'm going to paraphrase straight from the question in the chat. And if you've got any questions, you've got about 5 or 6 minutes to ask me before we're going to start talking about the last part of our conversation. But David asks, do you have any thoughts about bridging the gap between Ladywood and North Edgbaston area that the Loop and potentially future Civic Square are right in the middle of? Like, you've talked about so much great stuff. The area, you've connected people for years, you've done incredible work, you've worked with the people most in need. What are your thoughts about bridging the gap or bridging the space and area and communities that are now emerging here, and what does that look like for you?
I think a lot of what you're doing in encouraging people to come to the park is a really good start. Definitely. I think that there's something about, I can't remember where I heard this, might have been at Use It, but the idea is that the city is off down to your, what is it, east of you? Not sure. At the Loop, that's off in one direction. North Summerfield and North Edgbaston, or Summerfield and North Edgbaston, are off in the opposite direction. So I think the thing to do is to make sure that you don't just look one way. It's like you need to look in both directions, and you need to, I think, to look at the needs in both directions, because they're not quite the same. They're not identical, but there's a lot that's similar, definitely. I think how to bridge that. You see, I think at the moment it's the gap, the physical gap of the Loop and the reservoir. People don't often go from one side to the other to get things or to do things. But I think it would be maybe using the canal, a sort of careful use of the canal itself could be a way of doing that. But I don't know, I'm sure that there's ways of encouraging people in. I think the memorial hall where the neighbour nights were is close enough to you that if you were to link up with the things that had gone on there, and then to link up with the things that had gone on at the community centre at the other side, you could,
I think that, you know, in all the conversations we've had, and this is a really good point to sort of talk about this a little bit. I think for me, it's the point that you said so clearly about looking in both directions. Yes, this area is 10 minutes walk to Brindley Place on the canal, but it's not just about that direction. For me, I am consistently overwhelmed and excited by, like you said, the incredible energy that is across all those different parts, all the different corners of the reservoir, the work of people like Liz Pemberton, who's run a nursery here for many years, all the way to the new stuff on St. Vincent Street, like Eat, Make, Play, and the shop that's opening there, to long-term work with the older communities, to the food work of Real Junk Food Project, and the stories I heard from newly arrived communities or those moving into the area at the neighbour nights, and the coffee morning particularly that I experienced. There's so many different directions to look into. It's such a site of Birmingham's incredible diversity and energy and cultures and food and connectivity, that for me, that story together is the thing that makes this area amazing. It isn't this idea that it's just about one community supporting another who are in need, is probably not the story that I feel. There is a lot of, as you say, need, and lots of ways that communities are supporting each other to do that. And let's not even get into what needs to happen from a services point of view to support that. But I feel like the thing that you talked about, the two directions, those directions is what I think really makes this area incredible. And when communities start to come together and share resources and cook together and eat together and play together and grow together and tell each other stories, as you have talked about, it's where the magic really happens. And I think if you can combine that with some of the stuff we know around the data of, you know, those who are going to be renting that feel that will be pushed out and all of that, in order to create inclusive solutions with housing and other things, you start to have a story that is really powerful. And I'm interested in this because actually, Nets, you ever since I've met you, we've talked about this over and over again about how we keep doing this, but you've sat through so many of the consultations, so many changes, things closing down, things opening. You talked a bit about people being fed up of being done to. But tell me, like, you're still here, you're always hopeful, you're always connecting, you're always smiling despite all of the challenges and stories that aren't always positive in terms of how much need there is. What keeps you going? Because as soon as I met you, you were like, right, like, how do we make sure that we work together and we make sure what happens at Port Loop is inclusive, or we connect communities? What keeps you going? What gives you this energy and hope for the future, despite all the challenge that you see?
Oh, wow. I don't want to burst your bubble, but I'm not always. That's why I don't. There are times when I'm not. But I think you just got to have some sort of faith in the fact that people can be more than they think they can be. That there is the capacity within everybody to give, to share what they've got. And we see that so much. And I think that it's important to let people be a part of the solution, not even just I think as everybody's solution is different, that's the thing. So you're not just saying the solution is this because one size fits all, because that's not quite the case. So you're saying you're including people in the what is needed, and your solution is fluid. Your solution is fluid. It's going to be flexible and inclusive of everybody and their needs, and they are going to have to be part of the mix of making that happen. So you bring people in and you say, how do I what do I need to include you? What do I need to do to include you and your family and your friends in this solution? And you enable them to be part of the next step on in that. And I have to hope that that's possible. I think
Absolutely.
that's what my hope is, that is. And I've seen in the ways that people have come together through C19, you've seen that is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that from you. I mean, obviously, it's one thing that we share is exactly that, right? Because we both share this idea that this incredible bind that we're in. There's no easy solution out of what's going on in Ladywood is archetypal of communities all over the country. Huge need for new houses, more housing, local councils stuck in models of only being able to sell land, predominantly selling land to developers in the models that they're in, people genuinely needing homes and moving into areas, people genuinely wanting to connect. I sit on a commission at the moment in a place called Redbridge, which is a borough in Greater London, and the stories are exactly the same. Everybody is coming to the story genuinely. I need a new home. I've moved into the area. I want to connect with people, existing people, talking about the incredible assets that are there, feeling fearful of being priced out, of being forgotten, more expensive housing going up. This is not. It's not just in Ladywood. It's not just in Summerfield. It's all across the country. And as you've known, because you've been to lots of stuff that we've done at the hub as well. This is not a simple problem that we've just got one or two solutions and we'll be fine. If you've heard any of Alistair's land talks that he ever does at the hub, this is not a simple solution. The thing I think we share is this idea that you have to have hope that within that communities can come together, and that we find the moments and spaces in which we can create new realities. One of the things I've been quite excited by is the genuine nature of everybody I've come across, whether they're newly arrived for all sorts of different reasons or they've moved into the area. And many of the people who are doing so much good work for such a long time in the area, there is that connection or that will to want to connect. And I'm quite excited by what it means for that to happen genuinely, not in a way that is being consulted at, or not somebody, saying, we've got a project for this, we've got some money for you to do this, but actually watching what happens when people really start to be in relationship and in community together. And I wonder what that means for me. I think I can quite clearly say the future we're going into, with so many increased challenges coming our way, climate change, other things, there's going to be an absolute crucial need for communities to be together and to fight the divides that are being created and the red lines that are being put down between communities. Somewhere in that, I have to find that same hope to say that the solutions lie within some of the structural stuff, which we won't talk about today, because otherwise I'll go on a land rant. But from a point of view of so many people who are coming together, and I think that this area, B16, is just so full of that hope and optimism and energy despite all the challenges, which is a good point to take me into the next question, and feel free to respond to anything I've said. But we've got a question about what's one of your favourite stories of this connection and coming together that you talk about in COVID-19?
Oh, I don't know. I think this is really difficult because there's so many.
Yeah.
But there's from Ladywood.
Or anywhere you can.
Well, my favourite one isn't actually Ladywood. My favourite one is Erdington.
That's fine.
Because there's a lady who's a disabled lady who, when lockdown happened, the first thing that she thought was, I'm not going to be able to connect with anybody very easily, and there must be other people who are in the same situation as me, and I want to find out who they are and where they are. And got them together, you know, set up a little Facebook page to just say, if you're going to have problems connecting with people, or if there are things that you're going to need or need help with, get in touch and we'll see what we can do together. And that turned into a massive support network, which is like, I think within a few weeks, or within a week, maybe, I don't know, they'd got enough people saying, oh, well, look, I'd love to do the website bit for you, or the, you know, the Facebooky bit for you, and I'd love to do the setting up the volunteers, and I'll do your policies and procedures and all this sort of stuff. And, you know, now they're a major network of community volunteers who have set up a constitution and are going to keep going forever, and are linked up to their local community centre, and really, really huge things that they've done through lockdown, where, you know, you'd put a message up saying so and so's just been moved into this new place and they haven't got anything, and everything would suddenly come in, sort of thing. Or this person's got no food, what do we do about it? And it's there. Yeah, and that's that one that I absolutely love, that story. But there are others all over the place that are similar. I think the fact that, you know, the food distribution network is all WhatsApped together. I love that the tech has been able to jump in. We couldn't have done this 20 years ago even. We couldn't. But I think one of the things that's needed is to support the people who haven't got the tech, either who haven't got it, don't know how to access it, financially can't afford the broadband, whatever it might be. We need to get those people in and connected as well. That's really important.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that I've heard a lot as well about, you know, the technology has enabled so much more, but what we need to quickly do is make sure people are connected. One of my favorite stories from this particular area was the potato project. Go on, you tell us in your words how you saw that happen, because I think it would be nice to hear.
That was stunning. That was Eat, Make, Play had heard from a farmer, I think it was Sam, I'm not sure, had heard from a farmer friend that he was going to have to plough a whole field of potatoes, or rather he had a choice. Either he could get people to pick these potatoes for him, and then he wouldn't be able to pay the cost of actually getting the potatoes out of the field, because he wouldn't be able to get rid of them, because they were going to a chip manufacturer or something like that, I think. Or he could plough them back in and lose the field for 2 years because he wouldn't be able to do anything else with it. So Eat, Make, Play set up a potato project, Slow Food Birmingham and Eat, Make, Play, where they bought this whole field of potatoes, 10 tons of potatoes. It's a massive amount, I can promise you. And then they were selling them on the basis of it was going to be £10 for 10 kilos of potatoes. So to any individual who wanted to buy that. So for that £10, 8 kilos would go back into the emergency food supply, and the buyer would get 2. So the potato project then sorted the potatoes into those that were good enough to go straight in to the emergency food parcels without any more work. They were good. They weren't going to go off on the way. They were absolutely fine potatoes. And they all went into TORS, which was just working from down the road at the time, the Active Wellbeing Society food parcels. And then the ones that weren't good enough to do that with, which was many, we then had on a daily basis, there were people in there peeling these potatoes, which then went off to other groups around the city that were cooking them and sending them out as hot meals to everybody every day. That's the people who needed them. That was absolutely, that was an amazing project.
I was just mind blown by it because with that one problem, how many different things that they managed to quickly mobilise around, supporting the farmer, getting hot meals, making sure there was no waste, getting potatoes to people who purchased them, putting them in the food parcels. It was just so incredible. And I know a couple of times we were doing some of the virtual calls, and Sam or somebody else would, or I think you did, came into a call and you were like, I'm just down at the Eat Make Play shop, like peeling potatoes. So that was just, and it was just an example to me of what could be possible with if we had more time, if we were more circular with how we were thinking about this sort of stuff. But it was really, really amazing. And that for me was a glimpse of the future, right? That was a glimpse of all of the horror stories we hear about supply chains and food insecurity, and obviously, you know, for anyone who's a big system thinker on here, I of course know that something like the potato project wouldn't save everything, but what it was a glimpse of the future, that actually communities are so have so much ingenuity when it comes to how to solve problems, how to solve multiple problems, how to come together, how to support each other's businesses, livelihoods, health, food, etc. So yeah, that's a thing, I guess, that keeps me going as well, seeing things like this and going, no, we're seeing glimpses of the future, we're seeing how neighbourhoods are going to work together in the future. But I don't know if you want to say anything else to that. Otherwise, I've got one final question for you before we start to wrap up.
Only just that you said nothing was wasted. Absolutely nothing was wasted, because the potatoes that were too tiny went for seed potatoes next year, and the peelings all went and got composted. So, and obviously Eat Make Play are now doing so everybody needs to be growing organic, please, because then organic seeds are going to be really, really needed, because we're going to have problems not just importing food after Brexit, but also importing seeds. And so in October, Eat Make Play are doing a seed swap. So people can be encouraged to, if you have grown organic this year, please pick your seeds and get a proportion of them to Eat Make Play.
Okay.
So
this is a great call to action, because maybe one of the things we can work on after this, because I mean, I'm I'll be honest, I've got all these hopes and dreams of what I want to do with growing, but I've got zero clue, which would make my ancestors very, very angry, because they all grew up growing in Punjab, or maybe disappointed, perhaps not angry. So this is a thing, I think that's a really great little tutorial we could maybe do, where we're like, what does it mean? How do you pick seeds? What do we need to do? Let's get ready for the autumn. Because one of the things I've heard a lot of in the park over these sessions is people's kind of desire to grow and do so much of that. And anyway, I could like talk to you all day about things. So I want to start to wrap up. And I'm going to leave you with one question, which you can put anything into this if you want. So Nets, you're probably one of the most inspiring and dynamic people I've come across. And if you've seen all of what you've seen over the last 20, 30 years of some of the most beautiful things in our neighbourhoods be shut down, you've seen things happen that are amazing, things that have made you sad, what would be one piece of advice you'd give to someone like me? You know, one of these little upstarts who's like, we're going to build something like Civic Square, and we're going to bring people together, and we're going to do work at a neighbourhood level. You've done it all. You've done so much. You've brought so many people together. what would you give, what sort of advice would you give to someone like me who has hopes and ambitions of these beautiful, thriving communities? And you can have a couple of minutes to think about that, and everybody at home can have a little think as well. So you don't need to rush into that. But yeah, what's the one bit of advice?
I'm not sure it's one.
Okay.
I would certainly say, just get to know people. Just get to know as many people as you can, and what they, just listen to people genuinely, and sort of then connect up the people who can help each other. And I think the other thing is just don't give up. Just because it doesn't seem to be happening the way you expect it to, don't stop believing that something will happen. Because it will. I have a personal dream that something will happen on the loop, and have had for a long time. And yeah, so don't stop believing that something is there, and don't give up on it, but listen to people. That's the most important thing, definitely.
Thank you so much, Nets. And yeah, I think this is why I think we hit it off when we first met, because I guess that's the most important thing, is to listen deeply and to not give up. And I want to say a huge thank you to you, not only for the time today on the Setteee, but for your solidarity and love and care over the last couple of years, in helping us to navigate what this could look like. And most importantly, we're so excited to work with you over the coming years to see that personal dream, like you said, that you've been looking over for many years, that something magical will happen here. And I hope that we can be part of looking in all directions with you, listening deeply, building creatively, and coming together. So thank you for your work. Thank you for your care and connection, and thanks for your time today. We really, really appreciate it. And and for seeing your smiling face in the park. So thank you so much. And on that note, I'm going to start to bring this to an end and say we've got a couple of things to tell you about. So there's lots of amazing things that Nets has talked about that has gone online now. So if you're interested in things like neighbour nights or other virtual things that you can come to in B16, give us a shout. We'd be very, very happy to connect you. Personally, here at Civic Square in the front room, on Wednesdays and Saturday mornings, we've got in-person, physically distanced but not distanced, outdoor cafe with all sorts of things, from bike servicing to books to connecting with each other. So please come down if you can and tell a neighbour. All of the drinks and coffee and everything cakes are complimentary to those of you who are in the sort of 20 minutes neighbourhood around here. So walk down, cycle down, come down and say hello. If you can't make those, we've got our virtual programming, as I mentioned at the beginning, and those things are available. Sorry, I've just got a few things coming in the chat. Those things are available on our website, frontroom.cc, where you can have a look at the programming. Next Saturday, we've got Emma Mendez, who, if you haven't met Emma, is an absolute force of nature. Some of you might have come across her at Play Out Till Tea. She's such a beautiful soul. So come and join us and hear more about her work and Dime Studios. And then there's a few more, well, lots more coming up that aren't yet on the website that you can come, that you can follow. So keep going back, sign up to the newsletter or to the Neighbourhood Key that will keep you informed. And that will tell you all of what's coming at the front room and Civic Square. But one final time, huge thank you to Nets, and looking forward to being in community with you and working on some magic together. Thank you so much, Nets.
Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Of course. Take care. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Bye.